Hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to This Week at the Movies. And we have a big one. We are here the second week of July. July, a really big blockbuster month for 4th of July weekend. Last weekend, we saw Jurassic Park Rebirth take over the theaters. Now it is the new hope for a new DC universe. That's right, I'm talking about James Gunn's Superman. It has been 12 years since we saw the last time they started DC with what they called at the time the DC Extended Universe, kicked off in 2013 as Zack Snyder gave us Man of Steel. Now, 12 years later, Superman is ready to fly again. A whole new cast, whole new story, whole new cinematic universe. This one, again, as I mentioned, coming from James Gunn, who is now leading this new DC. He serves not only as the director here, but kind of the producer and hand that's guiding the rest of what is to come. We've already seen some from him. He did a Suicide Squad film, which actually was part of the old DCEU, but is merged over. We've seen him on the small screen with Peacemaker and the animated series Creature Commando, but a lot is riding on this film. It could pave the way for something wonderful. It could be a disastrous start. That'll end up being a matter of opinion, but let's dive in. This new film features a new Superman played by David Cornsweet and a new extended world, but it isn't an origin story. It picks up with Superman already a fixture in the world and at the Daily Planet. He's also already in an entrenched relationship with Lois Lane, played here by Rachel Brosnahan, but she kind of guards the secret of his real identity and their relationships. He's also already at odds with Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult here. He's the world's smartest man, but he's infuriated by Superman and other metahumans. This world of Superman is inhabited by other metahumans, some of which we actually meet in this film. Lex Luthor already well on his way towards a plan that he has hatched to get rid of Superman as we find the film opening. It isn't long before Luthor finds something on Superman that helps to try to turn the tide of public opinion against him. It has him questioning his past, his lineage, and his destiny as well. The question is whether he can overcome those doubts and Luthor's schemes to become a beacon of hope for the world. If you know much about Superman, the question of whether he's going to overcome Luthor or overcome those doubts really doesn't stay with you too long. But as I mentioned, a lot is riding on this film. It's not only a passion project for Gunn, something that he shares again in the introduction to the film that was provided for advanced screening audiences that are Amazon Prime members at Tuesday night screening. But it's meant to pave the way for this new universe. So you see some of the pieces of this new world. Other DC heroes pop up here, including a new Green Lantern played by Nathan Fillion, Mr. Terrific played by Eddie Gathegi, Supergirl, Millie Alcock, who is going to have her own movie later on, actually pops up as a cameo in here. And we meet Hawkgirl, played by Isabella Merced. We also see previously introduced characters like Rick Flag Sr., played by Frank Grillo. We saw him in the animated Creature Commandos. He was voiced by Grillo. Now we see him in the flesh. We also get a cameo from Peacemaker, played by John Cena, who has appeared in other Gunn projects in this world. But, this isn't really just about creating a larger world. For any of it to matter, you have to buy into these characters and this story. And that's where I kind of have some mixed feelings. If you've followed me, you've probably heard me mention that I was kind of mixed on Gunn's previous DC effort, Suicide Squad. I think this film is better, but it still has some misgivings for me. There are sequences and ideas in here that just don't quite work for me. There is an approach to the material and to the world building and to the character and to his backgrounds and to some of the iconic pieces that we've come to know of Superman over the many decades that are changed here. That is a choice that may work better for some, did not work for me. There are some sequences of action that feel a little bit goofy, and there are some tonal issues that I think feel at odds with what I typically think of Superman and what we've seen of Superman. In times I was actually frustrated and angry watching sequences of this film. That's especially true during most of the first act. I have bumped against some of Gunn's vision of how he wants to create this DC, and that carries over into this movie as well. But I cannot leave it there because there are moments of sheer brilliance here and moments of emotional resonance that I haven't felt in his other DC projects that give me some hope. There are some visual sequences here that are simply stunning. There is also a sense of humor that I think works better here, and there's plenty of heart. Those are two things I really loved about Guardians of Galaxy, which was his entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The big star here for me is Brosnahan. I think she is a treasure as Lois Lane. It's a different take on the character, and the film simply soars when she's on screen. It soars also when she and Corn Sweat are together. They are delightful in their way. He is a very strong Superman. I liked what he did with the character, and I think they are great together. Some of their sweetly emotional sequences were the times when I felt most passionate about this film. I liked Holt as Lex Luthor. I think he is passionate as a villain, makes for a good foil. And there is a great cast here. Gathegi is incredible as Mr. Terrific. Skylar Gisondo, who I've long enjoyed, provides some great comic relief, but also some pathos as Jimmy Olsen. I really loved Wendell Pierce, who plays Perry White. I don't think we got enough of the Daily Planet in this film. I hope if we get future Superman installments, which I suspect we will, that you get more of a sense of the Daily Planet, because that's always been a big part of the Superman story and a really fun part for me. One of the most heartfelt sequences in this movie is actually between Clark and his adopted father, Pa Kent, who's played by Pruitt Taylor Vince. It really got to me. Look, this is a different take on Superman, a different take on the world, but James Gunn infuses his unique talents and passions as a filmmaker here and creates something that, while I thought it was flawed, it's also deeply endearing. There are times when I found myself laughing, when I found myself pumping my fist in the air, and times when I was deeply moved. It isn't perfect, but in the end, I think it is a compelling ride and a very worthy summer blockbuster that is worth checking out on the big screen. I am giving it a thumbs up. And even though I didn't love this film, I am still cautiously optimistic there are going to be some things in this new take on the DC universe that will take some getting used to, but that I will enjoy. And I hope other people that see it end up feeling somewhat similar. But where does this one stack up against other Superman films? Well, if you follow me on the site, Binge Watch Tomorrow, I will have my complete ranking of standalone Superman films prior to this film. So what I'm not including in that is Zack Snyder's Justice League or the other version of Justice League where Superman plays a big part but is more of an ensemble. I'm also not counting Batman versus Superman in here. So this is the 4 original Christopher Reeve films, Superman Returns from Bryan Singer in 2006 and Man of Steel. So where would I slot it in here? You know, we've seen 3 people take on this role, and I thought each of them brought their own thing to the role. I've enjoyed Christopher Reeve, Brandon Routh, and Henry Cavill. I enjoyed David Corenswet here too. I think he brings something different. Again, I bumped up against some of the approach to this world, and that's probably where this ranking sits for me. As I mentioned last week, you know, I think it becomes very personal when you're talking about other films. With the new Jurassic World Rebirth, I thought there were things to like. I thought there were performances to like. There were moments to like, but it just didn't stack up against some of my favorites in that franchise. And that's a little bit how I feel about this Superman right now. I am probably one of the world's largest outliers because of standalone Superman stories. Superman Returns from 2006 has always been a personal favorite. You know, it's problematic in this day and age, maybe to talk about Bryan Singer or a movie starring Kevin Spacey, and unfortunately that's what we're stuck with. But I enjoyed Kate Bosworth in the role of Lois Lane. I really liked Brandon Routh as Superman. I liked the way that it tied back to some of the Christopher Reeve films and really tried to continue in that vein and told a very compelling story. And there were aspects about the way that they constructed Superman and the tenor of the world that have always really spoken to me. So that is kind of my number 1. Number 2, Superman 2, which I think is the best of the Christopher Reeve films, a great one from Richard Donner, another follow-up that I think is a lot of fun. I especially love the Richard Donner cut. Number 3 for me is Man of Steel. Man of Steel, you know, 2/3 of the way through, I thought I was watching a masterpiece. There are elements of the third act and the action sequences that kind of take me out of that a little bit, but there are just so much about the Superman and his mission and Clark and the way he relates to both his earthly father, Jonathan, and to his biological father, Jor-El, that really work for me and that I'll enjoy. Number 4, the original Superman. There is something about that first Richard Donner film from 78. It was landmark in a lot of ways. After that is where I would slot the new 2025 Superman. I gave it thumbs up, and there are certainly things that I love. Brosnahan may be my favorite Lois Lane of any of the Supermans, but there are just elements of it that I still bump against. And some of that's going to be personal preference. Some of that's the way they set up the world. I think this one takes a big deviation from the traditional approach to who Superman is and his backstory and things like that. And it's either going to work for you or you're going to bump up against it. And that was one of the things I bumped up against really hard. There's enough that I took out of this movie that I was able to get past it. But so for me, out of kind of those 7 standalone films, I would have this one as number 5, a little bit behind some of those other ones, but ahead of Superman 3, which probably is most famous for creating the plot for Office Space. I'll always be grateful for that. And Superman 4, which I think is a disaster on just a whole other level. So that's a little bit on Superman. If you're excited to see the new one, I think it is worth seeing on the big screen. It has some big screen effects. It has some beautiful performances. It has some incredible cinematic shots, some great needle drops, things that you've come to expect from James Gunn, a sense of humor that works. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a little over 2 hours long. It has a mid-credit and a post-credit sequence, something to be aware of if you are going and you don't want to miss out. But I enjoyed it enough for what it is. I'm giving it a thumbs up, and it makes me hopeful that we are going to see some good things from Gunn as he continues in this, new era. Superman is the biggest thing, but he's not the only thing you can check out in terms of new movies this week. I want to take a look at 3 smaller films that are either opening in limited release or going to VOD. The first of those, I'm just going to jump in and go to the one that I like the best, and it is dropping on VOD, and that is the new film Sovereign. This one feels like a very kind of timely film. It comes from writer-director Christian Swiegel. It focuses on a man, Jerry Kane, played by Nick Offerman, who is a single father who believes that he is a, quote, sovereign citizen, not recognizing the authority of governments, banks, contracts, or even the courts at times. He travels the country, kind of inspiring like-minded followers, trying to squeak out a living that way. But it's not what his son wants. It's not the life his son wants. His son, Joe, is played by Jacob Tremblay. He has his own dreams of actually going to public school, of moving a little bit out of this lifestyle, but he still loves his father, and he's kind of caught in the middle here. Quickly, Jerry runs afoul of the local jurisdiction. He's caught driving without a license. He ends up in jail for a while. The local police chief, played by Dennis Quaid, kind of tries to probe Joe for more information, but all that stalls out. And there's a lot of enmity when Jerry is released. It isn't long before things reach a boiling point. This film has an interesting discussion of a specific point of view of kind of sovereign citizens, the anti-government people that are out there. That part works pretty well and is interesting. But what really puts it over the top for me is it's an interesting look at troubled father-son dynamics, not just from Joe and Jerry. They are at the heart of the story, but we also get into the life of Dennis Quaid's chief of police and his own son, Adam, played by Thomas Mann. Both of these men have a very specific view of the world and a very specific view of what it means to be a man, and they impart those to their children. It ends with some dire circumstances that, at least in one sense, leads to some introspection from Dennis Quaid's character. Tremblay shines in yet another difficult role. He's played some very interesting and difficult parts, but your heart ends up breaking for Joe, especially as we round on the third act. The star of this film, though, is Offerman. He gives simply a searing performance. He is captivating as Jerry. He really helps lift this to another level. It is a tough story, but because of his good work, this ends up being an interesting watch. This one lands on VOD on Friday. So I hope you get a chance to check it out, simply to support Nick Offerman, who, again, gives a great performance in a very different kind of role. I think we think of him as a comedic actor, and he's very good at those kind of parts. But this is very somber, very serious, very different kind of part. I think he does great. Good supporting cast. We hear Megan Mullally's voice. She has kind of a fun role. We also see a good cameo from Martha Plimpton. It was a very solid cast. a movie that moves at a good pace that I found surprisingly engaging and emotional. Another limited release. This one opens and limited in theaters this week. It goes to more screens next week. I know, like Denver, which is near me, is actually getting it next week on July 18th when we have moved another week further away from Superman. But the movie from Sony Pictures Classic, Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight. This one is the directorial debut of Embeth Davidtz, who stars in here alongside Lexi Venter, who is pictured here in this picture. It is based on the nonfiction memoir from Alexandra Fuller. During the time of the movie, she was known as Bobo. That's the character that Venter plays. The story kind of picks up on her experiences growing up in Rhodesia, which is now known as Zimbabwe. It picks up in 1980 with the country on the cusp of a vote at the end of sort of a civil war. Bobo is a young girl living with an affluent white family that's part of kind of the ruling class, but this election threatens to kind of change that order and upend the lives they've known. Davidtz plays her mother, Nicola, who is having a particularly hard time with this potential change. As we begin, the election is just about to take place, and she's trying to pressure many in the country to vote for the quote-unquote right candidate, the one that will maintain the status quo. That doesn't happen, and things begin to change. The film goes through the election and its aftermath, during which time Nicola really has to come to grips with leaving behind the life she's known, property, and the life she built, and her family. The family ends up moving away. This is, as I mentioned, her directorial debut. I think she does some solid work both in front of and behind the camera. There is a really sturdy construction and solid performance in this film from Venter, who is our POV into the world. You know, the story is likely something that American audiences aren't going to be particularly familiar with, probably not knowing the full history of conflicts and social class and things in Zimbabwe. I wish we'd gotten to explore a little bit more of the history of that period and what was going on and some of the deeper things, but the source material is a reflection of what it was like for this young girl when she was growing up going through this. I think that limits how deeply it can be approached. It did leave me wanting more at times, but as I mentioned, it's a sturdy and engaging film, a solid directorial debut for Davidtz. As I mentioned, this one in limited release beginning this week, Friday, July 11th. It expands to more cities, including Denver, on Friday, July 18th. The last one I want to look at, another limited release that is opening in theaters this week, and that is Daniela Forever. This is the latest from writer-director Nacho Vigalondo. It's an interesting sci-fi drama premise about a man named Nicholas, played by Henry Golding, who is mired in grief. His girlfriend Daniela, played by Beatrice Grano, died 6 months prior, but he just can't let it go. A friend offers to get him into a program that uses lucid dreaming to help people move on and make progress. It's meant to help him make peace with the past, but instead he uses the process to bring Daniela back to life, avoiding her fate, and to continue their romantic journey together. But soon the line between reality and fiction kind of blurs completely. We've seen this kind of concept of exploring dreams and alternate reality and people's minds and thoughts before, famously in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is another kind of romance, fractured relationship, breakup kind of story. We also saw something similar in Inception, where people were working out issues. But in both of those, you know, the really refined characters and the deep emotional connections kind of help them to soar and stand out. This, you know, has some nifty visuals at times, and we do get some good performances from Golding and Grano, but unfortunately the story doesn't always match the lofty premise. I thought there was potential. I thought there was good moments. I really wanted to like it more than I did, but ultimately it just didn't result in the kind of satisfying film I was looking for. It opens in limited release on Friday, drops to VOD on July 22nd. So you can look for it if you're interested in these kind of premises, or in the past work. Vigalondo gave us Colossal with Anne Hathaway a few years ago. So if you're a fan of that, you may be a fan of seeing what else he's doing. But for me, this one gets kind of a mild thumbs down. So to recap, Superman, thumbs up. You know, I liked what they were doing. I'm excited about the world. Thumbs up also for Sovereign, especially a great performance from Nick Offerman. That one opens on VOD. I was more mixed, thumbs neutral kind of for Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight, which is also a very long title. That one opens limited release this week and then expands to more cities on July 18th. And then a slight thumbs down for Daniela Forever. I like the concept. I like some of the moments, but it just doesn't all come together for me. So, Superman, obviously the big one, a lot of people are going to be going to check out. But if you're looking for some of the smaller films, you want to try to catch something new at home, you want to see some good performances. There is a lot going on, as always, at the movies. Hope you guys enjoyed all that. I will be back next week. We have some big and interesting releases. We have I Know What You Did Last Summer, which is a reboot of the horror franchise that brings back Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. Excited to check that out. We also have Ari Aster's latest film, Eddington. I will be looking at both of those. I will probably be talking about some of my favorite 1990s, late 1990s horror films, because that was a kind of coming of age period for me. I was a guy who started high school in 1995, so I was really into some of those late stage 90s horror films that are having another moment, getting back into it. So it'll be something fun to look at and talk about, and looking forward to that. And then we will end the month in a couple of weeks. I'll be looking at Fantastic Four: First Steps. Very excited to talk about that. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week. If you're excited for Superman, I don't think you'll be disappointed. I think it is a good time at the theaters, whether you love it as much as some of the previous ones or not. I do applaud the effort from James Gunn, and I do think that there are some reasons to be excited for potentially what's to come with this new DC. So I hope you get a chance to check that out. Until next time, I'll see you guys at the movies.